Hi, everybody. Today is our very first read of Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and we have a very special guest with me today. This is Ever. He's a little cranky because he doesn't understand why he can't nap all day. So, this is Ever Bloom, Jamaica. He has two middle names. And so, friends, this is the story we're going to read, and I took a lot of time figuring out where I wanted to read from. And right behind me, that's where OJ, our cat, loves to hang out. And since the sun is out today, there's a pretty good chance he may appear. So that's why I chose this spot. So I'm going to start today by reading on the back of most books. They have something that's called a blurb, and that tells you just a little bit about what the story is going to entail. So on the back, it says, Charlie Bucket's wonderful adventure begins when he finds out one of Mr. Willy Wonka's precious golden tickets and wins a whole day inside the mysterious chocolate factory. Little does he know the surprises that are in store for him. So, this is the cover, and this is the original. There is also a movie of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Some of you have possibly seen, some of you shared with me yesterday that you have seen or read this book. So, one of the things we're going to be working on while we go through this novel together is something called character traits. Character traits are traits or things about the character that makes them special or unique. And there are 5 children in this book. Augustus Gloop, a greedy boy. Veruca Salt, a girl who is spoiled by her parents. Violet Beauregard, a girl who chews gum all day long. Mike TV, a boy who does nothing but watch TV. And Charlie Bucket, the hero. So those are the characters, and we're going to learn a little bit more of them as I read to you. So today, I'm going to start with chapter 1. Here comes Charlie. And here, friends, is one of the illustrations in this book, and there aren't many. Chapter books don't tend to have as many illustrations. They have a lot more words. And this says, here comes Charlie. These two very old people are the father and mother of Mr. Bucket. Their names are Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine. I think you can get a good look at them there. And these two very old people, let's see if we can make that a little bit easier for you to see, are the father and mother to Mrs. Bucket. Their names are Grandpa George and Grandma Georgina. And then down here, you can see this is Mr. Bucket and Mrs. Bucket. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket have a small boy whose name is Charlie. There's Charlie. This is Charlie. How do you do? And how do you do? And how do you do again? He is very pleased to meet you. Just in case you're wondering, Ever's fast asleep. The whole of this family, the 6 grown-ups, count them, and little Charlie Bucket live together in a small wooden house on the edge of a small town. So here, friends, is a very small picture of their house on the edge. That means just outside of a very small town. The house wasn't nearly large enough for so many people, and life was extremely uncomfortable for them all. There were only 2 rooms in the whole place altogether, and there was only one bed. The bed was given to the 4 old grandparents because they were so old and tired. They were so old and tired, and they never got out of bed. Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine on this side, Grandpa George and Grandma Georgina on the other side. 4 people in one bed. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket and little Charlie Bucket slept in the other room upon mattresses on the floor. In the summertime, this wasn't so bad, but in the winter, freezing cold drafts blew across the floor all night long, and it was awful. There wasn't any question of them being able to buy a better house or even one more bed to sleep in. They were far too poor for that. Mr. Bucket was the only person in the family with a job. He worked in a toothpaste factory where he sat all day long on a bench and screwed the little caps onto the tops of tubes of toothpaste after the tubes had been filled. But a toothpaste cap screwer is never paid very much money, and poor Mr. Bucket, however hard he worked and however fast he screwed on the caps, was never able to make enough money for the family and what they needed. There wasn't even enough money to buy proper food for all of them. The only meals they could afford were bread and margarine for breakfast. Margarine is an old kind of butter, it's like a substitute for butter. Boiled potatoes and cabbage for lunch, and cabbage soup for dinner. Sundays were a little bit better. They all looked forward to Sundays because then, although they all had exactly the same, everyone was allowed a second helping. The Buckets, of course, didn't starve, but every one of them, the two old grandfathers, two old grandmothers, Charlie's father, Charlie's mother, and especially little Charlie himself, went about from morning till night with a horrible, empty feeling in their tummies. And Charlie felt it worst of all. And although his father and mother often went without their own share of lunch or supper so that they could give it to him, it still wasn't nearly enough for a growing boy. He desperately wanted something more filling and satisfying than cabbage and cabbage soup. The one thing he longed for more than anything else was chocolate. Walking into school in the mornings, Charlie could see great slabs of chocolate piled up high in the shop windows, and he would stop and stare and press his nose against the glass, his mouth watering like mad. Many times a day, he would see other children taking creamy candy bars out of their pockets and munching them greedily. And that, of course, was pure torture. Only once a year, on his birthday, did Charlie Bucket ever get to taste a bit of chocolate. The whole family saved up their money for that special occasion, and when the great day arrived, Charlie was always presented with one small chocolate bar to eat all by himself. And each time he received it, on those marvelous birthday mornings, he would place it carefully in a small wooden box that he owned and treasure it as though it were a bar of solid gold. And for the next few days, he would allow himself only to look at it, but never touch it. Then, at last, when he could stand it no longer, he would peel back a teeny bit of paper wrapping at the corner to expose a teeny bit of chocolate. And then he would take a teeny nibble, just enough to allow the lovely sweet taste to spread out slowly all over his tongue. The next day, he would take another teeny nibble, and so on and so on. And in this way, Charlie would make his 10-cent bar of birthday chocolate last him for more than a month. But I haven't yet told you about the one awful thing that tortured little Charlie, the lover of chocolate, more than anything else. This thing for him was far, far worse than seeing slabs of chocolate in the shop windows or watching other children munching creamy candy bars right in front of him. It was the most terrible, torturing thing you could imagine, and it was this. In the town itself, actually within sight of the house in which Charlie lived, there was an enormous chocolate factory. Just imagine that. It wasn't simply an ordinary, enormous chocolate factory either. It was the largest and most famous in the whole world. It was Wonka's factory, owned by a man called Mr. Willy Wonka, the greatest inventor and maker of chocolates that there ever has been. And what a tremendous, marvelous place it was. It had huge iron gates leading into it and a high wall surrounding it, and smoke belching from its chimneys and strange whizzing sounds coming from deep inside it. And outside the walls, for half a mile around in every direction, the air was scented with heavy, rich smell of melting chocolate. Twice a day, on his way to and from school, little Charlie Bucket had to walk right past the gates of the factory. And every time he went by, he would begin to walk very, very slowly. And he would hold his nose high in the air and take long, deep sniffs of the gorgeous chocolatey smell all around him. Oh, how he loved that smell. And oh, how he wished he could go inside the factory and see what it was like. So, friends, that is the end of chapter 1. Tomorrow I will return and I will read chapter 2, Mr. Willy Wonka's Factory. But I have a little something I would like for you to do. Two things. The first is I'd love for you to sit down with some crayons or colored pencils, and I want you to use your imagination, and I want you to draw a beautiful picture of what you think Willy Wonka's chocolate factory looks like from the outside. Think and imagine and use all of your creativity. And if you can, have mom and dad put it up on our member hub page when you finish it so we can get to see everyone's picture of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Okay? The second thing I would like for you to do is I want you to talk at dinner tonight with your family and what it really means to be poor. We heard a lot about Charlie's family, how they lived in a small house. 4 people had to share one bed. Only one person in that family is working, and they were truly poor. I want you to talk with your mom and dad and see what they think poor means to them. So that's the end of today's reading. Of course, Ever is still here. He's still sleepy. He's going to go right back to sleep. And sorry, friends, OJ didn't join us, but hopefully he will again soon. I hope everyone enjoyed our first chapter, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.